It's a story about something that happened in Hawaii in 2002. Not the Hawaii you see in postcards. I'm talking about the real Hawaii, the one that exists about 20 feet beneath all those pretty ferns and tourist trails. The Hawaii that can swallow you whole if you're not careful. September 11th, 2002. Yeah, that date. 1 year exactly after the towers fell. But on the Big Island, 3 guys were just trying to have a normal morning. They were going hunting in a place called Fern Forest, near this old trail everyone calls Captain's Trail. I don't know why it's called that. Probably some story lost to time about a ship captain who got lost or died out there or whatever. These places always have names like that. Anyway, these 3 hunters, and I wish I could tell you their names, but the records just call them 3 hunters like they're characters in a fairy tale. They knew this area pretty well. Well enough to feel comfortable, at least. Well enough to think they could wander off the main path and do a little exploring between hunting spots. That's the thing about being familiar with a place. It makes you just confident enough to get into trouble. Now, if you've never been to the Big Island, let me explain something about the ground you're walking on. The whole island is basically one giant volcano. Actually, 5 volcanoes, technically, but who's counting? And when lava flows, it doesn't just cool and stop. It creates these tubes, hollow tunnels where the lava drained away, leaving behind these networks of caves that wind through the island like wormholes in an apple. Some of them are massive. Some of them are tiny. Some of them are right beneath your feet, covered by nothing more than a few inches of dirt and plants that have been growing there for decades, creating this false floor that looks perfectly solid until it isn't. The hunters found a cave entrance that morning. And honestly, I get it. You're out in the forest, you've got your headlamps, you see this dark opening in the rocks, and you think, why not? Let's check it out for a few minutes. Maybe there's something cool in there. Maybe it's just a shallow depression. You don't think you're about to walk into a labyrinth. But that's exactly what it was. Lava tubes aren't like normal caves. There's no limestone formations, no stalactites to give you landmarks. It's just black rock, smooth in some places, jagged in others, and every tunnel looks identical to every other tunnel. The darkness is absolute, the kind of dark that feels like it has weight. Your headlamp beam just gets swallowed up after a few feet. And these tubes branch off constantly. You take a left, then a right, then you think you're heading back, but actually you've just gone deeper. After an hour or so, you have no idea which way leads out. After 2 hours, you're just hoping you don't fall into a lower level. That's what happened to these guys. They went in thinking they'd explore for a bit, and then suddenly they couldn't find the entrance. They tried retracing their steps, but every tunnel looked the same. Their headlamps started getting dimmer. The cold started seeping in, because these tubes stay around 55 degrees year-round, and when you're wet from humidity and not moving much, that's cold enough to be dangerous. And the silence. I think that might be the worst part. Complete and total silence except for your own breathing and the occasional drip of water somewhere in the darkness. Meanwhile, up on the surface the sun set. Then it got late. Then it got really late. The family started making phone calls. Were they? Did they say where they were going exactly? What time were they supposed to be back? You know, that creeping dread that starts as annoyance and slowly morphs into real fear? That's what the families were going through. By midnight, they called the authorities. The Hawaii County Fire Department got the call and organized a search party for First Light on September 12th. Brent Matsuda was one of the firefighters who responded. He was 41, been with the department for years, knew the Big Island's terrain as well as anyone. He had a reputation for being thorough, careful, the kind of guy you want on a rescue team. He'd probably been on dozens of searches in these forests. He knew about the lava tubes. Everyone who works search and rescue on the Big Island knows about the lava tubes. But here's the thing about knowledge. It doesn't always save you. Sometimes you can know something intellectually and still not see it coming in the moment. The search teams fanned out through the fern forest area around Captain's Trail. And I need you to understand what this forest is like. It's not like walking through woods in Oregon or North Carolina. The vegetation is so thick, so dense, that in many places you're not actually walking on the ground. You're walking on top of a mat of ferns and vines and dead plant material that's all woven together into this false surface. It feels solid. It looks solid. Underneath, there could be a 6-inch gap or a 6-foot gap or a 60-foot gap. You can't tell until you step on it. The teams were calling out, listening for responses, checking likely areas where lost hunters might have emerged. It was around 10 in the morning, so the hunters had been underground for about 24 hours at this point, when Matsuda was moving through a particularly dense section of ferns. He took a step forward. The ground gave way beneath him like it was never there at all, because it wasn't. It was just ferns, just plants stretched over empty space, and his weight was enough to break through. He fell 90 feet straight down into a lava tube. I want you to think about that for a second. 90 feet is about 9 stories. Imagine falling from the 9th floor of a building, but instead of hitting pavement, you're hitting jagged volcanic rock in pitch darkness. You don't see it coming. You're just walking one moment, and then you're in free fall, and then you're hitting stone. Matsuda hit hard. His helmet probably saved his life. Those fire department helmets are built to take impact. His backpack might have helped too, giving him some padding. But he still broke ribs, damaged his spine, internal injuries that I don't even want to think about. The pain must have been unimaginable. But he was conscious, and he screamed. His team heard him. They rushed to where he'd been standing and found this gaping hole in the ferns, like the earth had just opened its mouth and taken a bite. They could hear Matsuda down below, could hear him groaning, and they knew immediately how bad it was. This wasn't a twisted ankle situation. This was life or death. They called for backup, for ropes, for a helicopter. Then they started rigging a rope system as fast as they possibly could. You have to understand, these guys are professionals, but they're also watching their colleague and friend dying at the bottom of a cave. The urgency must have been overwhelming. At the same time, they had to be careful. One mistake with the ropes, and they'd have 2 casualties instead of 1. They got someone down to Matsuda, got him stabilized as much as possible, got him into a harness. Then they hauled him up 90 feet of rope rescue, pulling dead weight up through a narrow opening. When they got him to the surface, they called in the helicopter and flew him straight to Hilo Medical Center. The doctors later said he was in critical condition. Touch and go for a while there. But here's what Matsuda's fall revealed. They'd been searching in the right area. The lava tubes were right there, right under their feet, which meant the 3 hunters were likely somewhere in that same network of tunnels. So even as part of the team was dealing with Matsuda's evacuation, the rest of them kept searching. They started checking every cave entrance they could find, calling down into the darkness, listening. And the thing about lava tubes is they all connect eventually. You could enter through one hole and come out a quarter mile away through a completely different opening. The hunters could be anywhere in this underground maze. I don't know how long they searched. Hours, probably. The sun was getting lower, and there was this terrible possibility hanging over everyone, that they might not find these guys before dark, that they'd have to call off the search and try again in the morning, knowing that the hunters would be spending a second night underground. But then someone heard something, a voice, faint, echoing up from one of the tubes. They called down, called again, and they heard a response. They'd found them. Getting them out was the next challenge, but at least they were alive, at least they were conscious enough to respond. The rescuers talked them through it, guided them toward the voices, and eventually the 3 hunters crawled out into the daylight. And when I say crawled, I mean it. They were in bad shape. Not Matsuda-level bad. Thankfully, no broken bones, no major injuries. But they'd been underground for about 26 hours at that point. Their headlamps had died hours earlier, so they'd been sitting in absolute darkness, cold, wet, not knowing if anyone would find them. They had mild hypothermia. They were exhausted, dehydrated, probably in shock. One of them later said the worst part was not knowing if anyone was looking for them, not knowing if they'd ever see sunlight again, just sitting there in the cold and the dark, waiting. When they came out, they looked like they'd aged 10 years. That's what trauma does to a face. But they were alive, shaken, definitely going to have nightmares about tight, dark spaces for the rest of their lives, but alive. Meanwhile, Matsuda was fighting for his life at the hospital. Broken ribs, spinal damage, internal bleeding, the kind of injuries that can go either way. The doctors did what they could, and somehow, against pretty significant odds, he stabilized. Started recovering. It took months, I'm sure. Physical therapy, probably pain that never fully goes away. But he lived. He actually made a full enough recovery to go back to work eventually, which is pretty remarkable when you consider that a 90-foot fall onto volcanic rock should probably kill you. I think about this incident sometimes when I see those beautiful photos of Hawaii that people post online. The lush forests, the green valleys, the tropical paradise vibe. And it is beautiful, don't get me wrong. But underneath all that beauty is this other Hawaii, this network of hollow spaces and hidden voids, ancient lava flows that cooled 1,000 years ago and left behind these traps just waiting beneath the ferns. The scary part is how easy it is to break through. You don't need to be doing anything wrong. You can be an experienced rescuer who knows the terrain, who's being careful, who's doing everything right. You take one step in the wrong place and the earth just opens up beneath you. No warning, no second chance. And the thing is, this kind of incident happens more often than you'd think on the Big Island. Not usually to rescue workers, thank God, but to hikers, to people exploring off-trail, to hunters like those three guys. Someone falls through into a lava tube every few years. Sometimes they get out. Sometimes they don't. The Big Island has rescue teams that specifically train for cave rescues because it's that common of a problem. I looked into it after I first heard this story, and apparently there are thousands of lava tubes on the Big Island. Thousands. And only a fraction of them have been mapped or documented. The rest are just there, hidden under the jungle floor, waiting. Some of them are small, just a few feet deep. But others go down hundreds of feet and stretch for miles underground. There's one called Kazumura Cave that's over 40 miles long and drops more than 3,000 feet in elevation. It's one of the longest lava tubes in the world, and it's just sitting there under the island, mostly unexplored. The fern forest area where this happened is particularly dangerous because the vegetation is so thick. It creates that false floor I mentioned, where you literally cannot see what's underneath until you're falling through it. Park rangers and fire departments have tried to map the known tubes, tried to put up warnings, but it's impossible to catch them all. New ones get discovered all the time, usually because someone falls into them. What gets me about the Captain's Trail incident is how it could have ended so much worse. If Matsuda had landed differently, if his helmet hadn't absorbed some of the impact, if the fall had been just a bit higher or onto a sharper section of rock, he'd be dead. If the hunters had panicked and kept moving deeper into the tubes instead of staying put, they might never have been found. If the rescue teams hadn't been able to hear Matsuda's screams or the hunters' voices, both searches could have failed. There were so many points where this could have turned into a recovery operation instead of a rescue. But luck was on their side that day. Or maybe it was skill, preparation, the fact that the hunters eventually made the smart decision to stay in one place and wait. The fact that Matsuda's team knew how to rig a rope rescue under pressure. The fact that the helicopter could get there quickly. Sometimes survival is a combination of all those things, a little bit of luck, a little bit of skill, a little bit of other people refusing to give up on you. I don't know what happened to those 3 hunters after that day. I hope they're okay. I hope they still go outside, still appreciate nature, but maybe stick to marked trails now. I hope they think about Brent Matsuda sometimes, about the man who fell 90 feet while trying to save them. I hope they understand how close they all came to not making it home. And I hope anyone reading this who plans to visit Hawaii, who wants to explore the beautiful forests and hidden trails, understands that this island is not a theme park. It's a real place with real dangers. The ground you're walking on might not be ground at all. It might be a thin crust over nothing, just waiting for the right amount of pressure to give way. And once you fall through, once you're in that darkness, everything changes. Your whole world becomes about getting back to the light. That's what happened on September 11th, 2002, in a remote corner of the Big Island. 3 hunters went into a cave and couldn't find their way out. A firefighter fell through the earth trying to find them. And somehow, against odds, everyone survived. It's the kind of story that should be more famous than it is, honestly. But maybe that's appropriate for something that happened underground, in the dark, where most people never see.